Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to try and unravel a pretty complex web of stats and data and so on, which is in the United States, employment statistics and employment numbers. Now, in part of this matrix is wage growth, hourly wage growth, and also productivity. Now, worker productivity, labor productivity. So how do all of these interact? And then how do they indeed interact with mass migration or the reduced mass migration, particularly the illegal migration coming into the United States during the Biden years? Now, again, I don't think Biden even knew what day it was during that time. So it's the globalist goons all around Biden that were engineering this. But the something like 220 and some estimates being sort of 250, 260,000 illegals per month were streaming into the United States. And so you're looking at approximately 10 million over 4 years. Now, how many of these actually got jobs? How many were fraudulent legal jobs, as in they stole someone's social security numbers, and how many were just working for payment under the table or for packaged up type wages, like accommodation, food, and then say, hey, and we'll send $50 a month or $100 a month to your relatives back in some shithole country. Those sort of things were widespread. So what were real jobs? What were productive jobs? What were daycare jobs? How many actually got jobs? So out of and I'll just use round numbers, out of the 200,000 a month, the claim is if we pick apart the statistics, that these 200,000 illegals coming into the country created somewhere in the region of 70,000 jobs a month. But what sort of jobs were they? Were they daycare jobs, productive jobs? If you're paying someone peanuts and because they can't do much or you don't need them to do much, to what extent is that a real job or some bullshit job? And the list goes on of permutations and possibilities as we pick apart the stats. But the claim from the Department of Labor, if I've understood it correctly, I think I have, and I didn't do a super deep dive, I don't have the time for that, but out of these 200,000 or so illegals that came in, approximately 70,000 new jobs have been created, but there's no determination of what sort of jobs were they. Are they someone who's allowed to live in the barn on that hay barn, hay loft on the farm, and they live there and they're given a little bit of food to cook themselves, and they for a few hours a day they pick oranges or apples or something like that, or what do? They swat away the flies from spoiling the crops, and so it's hard to tell what a productive or unproductive job is, given the illegals, and they're much harder to try how much fraud was there. That's quite high, but the number is actually unknown. And again, the packaged up thing, and there's a lot of that in Australia too, where legals and illegals come in. More legal in Australia because it's an island and quite a long way from anywhere else. But they come in as bullshit students, supposedly studying, but then go and work. So they can be 20 people to a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. Mattresses stacked high and all this sort of thing, three level bunk beds. And so there's 6 or 8 people to each room. And then they go and work at the local, I don't know, Chinese restaurant or Indian takeaway or something like that. And they don't really have any money because their accommodation and food's provided. They're not paid, not as we would, a salary, and then you go out and spend the money as you see fit. Their salary is all packaged up, and so they don't get to see hardly any of the money. And what little money is made, again, is sent to their relatives in wherever with that employer, usually a labour hire front of some sort, taking a cut. So when we're trying to establish, is it even feasible that 200,000 illegals come in? They're not all men. There's children, some women there. Say 20% are women and children, maybe even a little bit less, but let's say 10%. That's probably maybe more accurate there, but not so much across the US border where they could just walk across. In Mexico, there's a much higher proportion of women and children. The shorter the journey, typically the higher proportion of women and children are in that illegal migrant journey or illegal alien journey. So for sake of argument, we'll say 180,000 men turned up. They'll pretty much all be peasants with no qualifications. Some of them will have never worked. Many of them never worked. They'll at best have a first-year high school education, and that's in a country where education is piss poor anyway. So we're looking at illiterate peasants with no job skills or capabilities. So they're coming into the United States, and 70,000 jobs are created. Now, is this jobs that they get? These out of these 200,000, 70,000 people getting, or these men getting jobs, picking fruit or cleaning toilets or cleaning hotel rooms or something like that? Is that it? And it's all through a labour hire firm. So it's very difficult to measure. Again, social security fraud and all that sort of stuff. Or a 70,000 net benefit jobs created. So for all these illegals that come in, excuse me, there's additional jobs created in, teaching positions for the illegal alien kids, or health workers to tend to all these sick people with all their bubonic plague and all the shit that they bring with them. Where are the jobs created? Are any jobs created? Are these jobs productive? It's hard to believe that any productive jobs, for example, if a whole lot of healthcare workers have to be hired to look after these illegals who produce nothing, pay nothing, deliver nothing, and then on top of that, there's interpreter services, and this goes on and on, then that's hardly a net benefit to the US economy. So where are these jobs being created, and are they real jobs? Or as in the case today, jobs in the public service and daycare jobs. For example, Indians in particular flooding into Australia, and they're nearly all going into government, public service government jobs that aren't needed or wanted, or they're going into daycare jobs in multinational companies where there'd be thousands of local Australians that could do that job, but they're being gifted to the fresh off the boat or the plane Indian immigrants who have contributed nothing and bring nothing, deliver nothing. So those are daycare jobs, and they just they're a drag on productivity, worker productivity, rather than increasing it. And if you look at the general daycare jobs for women in the corporate and bureaucrat sector, I mean, these are daycare jobs on steroids. These people do nothing. They just shuffle paper back and forth to each other, but achieve and produce and create absolutely nothing. So this comes back to all these illegals coming. Do they create jobs? Well, if they only create jobs that are underpaid, where they're paid somewhere in the line of maybe a quarter or a third of the actual wage that should be paid, then these are not real jobs, and they're going into businesses that are not real businesses. For example, if a business can only prosper or survive even by paying workers 1/3 of what they're supposed to be paid, using backdoor methods of packaging with accommodation and so on, then that's not a viable business. And there are many businesses, all around Australia now that are being bought up by Indians and Chinese and so on, and they just bring out their peasants from the home village to work there for next to nothing, and in that way, and then they deal in cash only. In that way, they can launder the money and launder the wages and so on. But a business like that would never generate taxable income. The workers will never reach a threshold where they would pay tax. So it becomes a net drain on the economy and the Australian or Western society. So when you're looking at these employment numbers and productivity numbers, there's a lot of stuff interacting in the matrix here. But recently, looking at US employment numbers, there's a claim that the number of people employed actually went backwards, or the new jobs created were less than expected. And in some cases, it's negative. Negative 20,000 jobs, for example, were created. But then when you look at the amount, the increase in productivity and the increase in wages, this is the relative hourly wage rate being paid, then you see improvements in there. Does that directly translate into lower employment. If you're losing workers who are working unproductively on bullshit daycare jobs for illegal, if you like, illegal wages, then, and those jobs are being lost, then that is a net positive to the society, to the economy. So that needs to be considered as well. But I think there's a failure to come to grips with this it could be in the United States in particular, that's cut back on their immigration numbers. So now, as soon as all the rush of illegals coming in during that 2020 to 2024 period, as soon as that mass of as President Trump closed the border coming in, then this means that those jobs they supposedly were doing, the 70,000 new jobs a month allegedly being created, that those jobs all disappeared once the illegals stopped coming in. So that would suggest that the jobs were never real in the first place, and they were phantom jobs or bullshit jobs being created. This assumes that the Department of Labor and Statistics in the United States wasn't just churning out propaganda, and I suspect they were to some extent to run cover for the mass illegal migration coming in. But this brings us back to the material point that the jobs, productive jobs, are the ones that are needed. And if illegals are flooding into businesses that are not viable anyway, whether it be takeout food or restaurants, it doesn't matter, or hotels that can only survive if they've got illegal illiterate peasants cleaning the rooms and so on, then those are non-viable businesses. So the business model of entire swathes of the US economy, takeout food, hotels, that sort of thing, that entire business model really needs to be revisited and looked at, saying, okay, if you can't make a dollar, if the only way you can survive is using illegal alien peasant labor, then you don't have a viable business model. So something else has to happen. Either you get looked after through the tax system, because it's somehow a societal benefit to have these businesses operating, or if you have to employ people on legal, proper, mandated, sanctioned wages, and you then close the business, the money needs to go somewhere else, or you need a different self-service model of accommodation or something. You need somehow to adjust your business model. And I would argue that the mass immigration, whether it be legal or illegal, it's almost irrelevant, but mass immigration across the entire Western world has created a gazillions of unproductive daycare bullshit jobs, as well as illegal payment jobs that have created a super bloated public service and NGO sector, and also big multinational companies that feed off government contracts at exceptionally high prices, and in return they have to employ vast numbers of illegal alien or give daycare jobs to mass migrant aliens. That the unproductive sector of the economy and of employment has grown almost exponentially, while the productive sector has declined. And I think in the United States, they have a great opportunity to address this imbalance and get rid of these daycare jobs, but also say to business, listen, you got to change your business model. Maybe we'll give you a 12-month tax holiday or something like that, a tax vacation to transition from one to the other. But if the only way you can fucking survive is using illegal aliens and peasant labor at illegal wages, then you don't have a viable business. You got to rethink it all and come back to creating real jobs, productive jobs in the economy, where productivity and merit decide outcomes. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.